All right, y'all, so we're going to get started today. Thank you so much for coming out on this fine Monday today. We'll be going over the composite letter, some tips and tricks where we have the advisors as well as the peer mentors tell you a little bit about any tips that can be applied for the application that isn't already found on the instructions page. So we'll just have all of the advisors as well as the peer mentors start off by introducing themselves. So advisors, just tell us who you are, what you do, and then peer mentors, name, year, as well as your path, like pre-med, pre-med. Start with Hugh.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Hugh Grant. I'm one of the advisors in the pre-auth office for the alphabet group I through P.
Hi everyone, Anil Shetty, one of the advisors for Q through Z and pre-dental.
Hello guys, my name is Sebastian. I'm a current fourth year in the college, majoring in biology on the pre-med track.
Hi everyone, my name is Dwight. I'm a senior at Emory studying biology on the pre-med track.
Awesome. So today, hopefully you'll learn a lot more about the composite letter process, especially since you've already started it, and we'll be getting a lot of experience from our panelists. So we'll start off just going over a general overview of the process with Anil, including what is due by January, as well as some nuances that are a part of the composite letter process.
Yes. Okay, cool. So you've hopefully already actually seen this slide. So this is hopefully a little bit of a review. And I am working with the assumption that you have already gotten access to the application. So if you haven't already gotten access to the application, we are not doing live info sessions this year. It is an asynchronous session. You can catch it on the blog, on the PHA YouTube, on our new SharePoint site. There's lots of places to catch it. And if you're not sure where to find it, you can also talk to any of these guys and any other peer mentors that you might know that are not here. They would be happy to guide you in the right direction on how to get access to the application. Primarily because it's a pretty informative session, so I don't want to sort of repeat any of the information that our composite letter writer Danny has covered, our program coordinator Susan has covered, or any of the stuff that I mentioned as well in the video. So what I am going to do is, all right, so hopefully you already have your composite letter application. It is now due in, roughly about 45 days or so. I know that's coming up. I know you're in the middle of finals grind right now, so it is totally okay to sort of think about this post finals. There's time for you over winter break, but there are a couple of things I want to make note of. So we design our composite letter process very intentionally to look a lot like the real thing. And if you're sitting in this room, you've given some consideration to the idea of taking your next step and applying to medical, dental, podiatry, or optometry programs this summer, or you're a senior in the room and you're still kind of deciding what your pathways are. And if you're a senior in the room, regardless of your timeline, still go ahead and get your composite letter now. So what do you have to do? What's this first step? So first step, hopefully you got your access to the application. And now that you have access to the application, hopefully you've got an opportunity to play around with it, browse it, check it out a little bit. So if you've done that, or if you haven't done that, make sure you do that after today. Just give it a quick glance. And I do want to make note of a few things, primarily because there's some stuff that really takes a lot of time. And it's on purpose that it takes a lot of time because we're basically asking you to practice what it's like to really apply to the real thing, the very same application services that you might encounter this summer, whether that's AMCAS for MD programs and MD PhD, ACOMAS for DO programs, TMD SAS for the Texas Medical and Dental Schools, ADSAS if you're pre-dental, OptumCAS or AACP, OMAS. There's not a good acronym for them other than their letters. So for optometry and podiatry respectively. So what do you have to turn in on January 18th, right? This is a firm deadline. So make sure you meet it, 5 p.m. Eastern time, as you see on there, right? There's an application form. This is some of the basic stuff, a lot of your demographics, personal history information, things of that nature. Hopefully it'll take a few spare moments to fill that out. That's something you can start doing now if you want to get a quick, easy win or get a nice little check on your checklist if you're a to-do person like me. Then you'll work on your academic history. So this is also a great way to self-inform that you have met your prerequisites and that you are prepared to apply this coming summer. Your prerequisites do not have to be completed prior to application, but obviously there is the dynamic of making sure that you've covered that material as well so that you're prepared for your respective entrance test. As a part of that, we'll ask you to submit some unofficial transcripts. You do not have to pay for a transcript at Emory. Please don't pay for a transcript from if you've taken classes somewhere else. We just want to make sure that you are getting into the practice of knowing how to access your information and sending that to us so we have verification of your stuff and that you've, again, sort of completed all these prerequisites. This is good practice as well because you will need to collect official transcripts for the real thing. Again, we don't need official ones. We don't want you spending money on that right now. Screenshots are totally fine as long as they have your name as well as maybe the school and identifying information about the coursework that you've taken. So screenshots are fine. That should hopefully take a little bit of your time. Lots of practice needed for that because you will have to fill out an academic history portion in your respective application service. That's a little bit new as well. So if you have previously engaged in this process, this is one of those differences that Sebastian and Dwight may not be able to comment on, but you can certainly talk about what was it like to put down all your coursework. We'll get to that here in a second. So the two things that will take up the most time for you, which is why we've been sort of pushing you to get started early, get started quickly, start on this sooner rather than later. And if you're someone who might be trying to take the MCAT in January, you definitely want to go ahead and start working on this little by little, is the essays and the activity logs. So the essays is an opportunity for us to get to know you a little bit more, learn a little bit more about your background, your experiences. This is great practice for you to start making meaning of your experiences, right? It's great to have to list all of them, which you will do in the activity log, but you have to start providing more information and more narrative around what it is that you've done. So we use this material and we sort of transform it and craft it into what will eventually be part of your composite letter. If you do this right and you do this well, your essays can be sort of a form of you pre-writing possible secondaries this summer, and your activity log is intentionally meant to look a lot like specifically the AMCAS experience log that is section 5 of your AMCAS application. So the more serious you take this, the better. And honestly, you could go as well as copying and pasting it. We are not sending any of this material that you are submitting to us. Let me clarify again. We are not submitting any of this material as a part of your composite letter. We are using it in the construction of writing that cover letter about you, where we break down those sections of academics, service and leadership, clinical, and research if applicable. But we're not sending any of this. So this is for you. This is practice. This is great preparation. And, you know, if you want to copy and paste some of this material because you are proud of what you've put together, you absolutely can. Last but not least, so that we can remember your wonderful faces, we ask for a professional headshot. Do your best with it. Just keep in mind that this is, you know, something to try to think about representing yourself. You will probably be asked in a lot of school secondaries to submit a headshot. I see you both nodding because you probably went through that yourself. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys real quick. Sebastian, I'll start with you because you were someone who sort of navigated composite letter season last year, as well as you took the MCAT in January 2021. So how did this go as you went into winter break?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of found myself in a position where I was trying to juggle like finishing up junior year or finishing up like fall junior year and like navigating all the finals that come with that as well. And also finishing up like MCAT prep, which I took like around January 17th. So obviously like one thing that I do recommend if you're in a position similar to that is like don't leave your composite letter stuff for like the week before your MCAT or even 2 weeks because you don't want to be worrying about that when you have such a high stakes exam on your mind. So essentially try to have that done at least maybe 1 or 2 weeks before that last week before MCAT so that you can just focus solely on that or even on relaxing before you take that exam, right? So that's kind of like one thing. And also like you don't need to worry about it, I think, like about formally writing what you're going to put on the app after your finals. There's plenty of time during winter break. Obviously, you don't want that to get in the way of you spending time with your family, but also do make sure that you have it in like by this deadline because it's super important for all of us, you know.
Dwight, would you want to add anything about, I know you took the MCAT later in your spring, but still.
Yeah, I took it April 10th. of my junior year. And what I will say is that I know a lot of people like to push their test back. And I was thinking about it too. And the last day that I would have been able to push it back maybe was to like the end of April, because after that, there's really not much time before the window opens up to submit your primary application. But honestly, for those of you that are really thinking about it, I would consider like, how much more am I really going to get done with that extra time? Because I know for me, I knew that, yes, even if I push it back like 2 or 3 weeks, like I'm going to have that false sense of security that I'm going to work a lot harder. But in reality, I knew that I wasn't going to do that. I was going to push my work off even more. But by keeping it at this state and knowing that, no, I'm not going to change it, that forced me to work even harder within that time frame. So that's something I would definitely think about. Like, obviously, you can push your test back. And if you have a lot of time and if you know you can dedicate, put a good schedule that you can get it done, that use that extra time you have to get it done, cool. But honestly, I know for me at least, I was just going to push it off and like not study as hard with the extra time. So that's just something that I would think about in terms of like scheduling your test around this very busy semester.
Anything you would want to add about all this material?
Yeah, I think listen to both of their timelines. They're different, but there's something to take from both of them is that you need to be prepared and be preemptive. Now is the time to really start to think about methodically when and how you're going to get things accomplished. And look at this no different than a fourth or fifth class on your schedule. That class comes with a syllabus. This doesn't, so you get to create your own syllabus for this class.
Yeah, that's real.
So, Anil, I think earlier talked a little bit about how the academic history for this year's cycle is a bit different than before.
Yeah.
And there's good reason to it. Do you want to go into a little bit more detail about that?
Sure. So for all of the application services that we mentioned, so I won't go through all the list once more, but well, you know what? Let me do a quick show of hands real quick for the audience. Raise your hand if you are pre-med. Let's find out. Okay, most of them. Raise your hand if you're pre-dental. Where are my pre-dental friends? Oh, hey, Tara. What about, are there any people in the room that are thinking about pre-optometry or podiatry? Don't be shy. We love our friends. No, okay. All right, that's okay. And then any MD, PhD people. You count in the medical category, but cool, good, wonderful. Love to see it. All right, so mostly, other than for you, Thara, sorry to pick you out, but then I think we can sort of tailor this a little bit more AMCAS-centered because everybody else is that way, but don't worry, it all kind of applies the same way. But basically, in AMCAS, you are asked to categorize your courses. They will, the application reviewers themselves will go back in once you submit it and we'll take a look at what you have submitted, but you have to go ahead and list. We are going to give you that tool in as we get closer to applications where you can use the AAMC course classification guide. For those of you who have devices on you, you could just Google that too, AAMC course classification guide, so you can see what disciplines they count each coursework under. So you want to kind of get practice into that, and effectively we want you to be able to get that practice now by listing out all the courses that you've taken at Emory that apply to the specific prereqs that we generally advise on. Your biologies, your 2 years of chemistry, your physics, your statistics, your social sciences, English, biochem. Did I miss anything? Okay, good. But yeah, what was that like for you guys when you had to actually fill it out in AMCAS?
I really think this is a really good addition to the composite letter process, because when I was filling out the AMCAS, I thought that was going to be really easy and just filling it out. But it turns out there's a lot of nuance to it, trying to figure out exactly what falls within which category. And that can really take a lot of time, and you don't want to spend time on that part because that's not meaningful at all. Your story is what really matters, so you don't want to spend the bulk of your time just trying to categorize things. So if you can get this out the way and get all of that stress, by just putting it on your composite letter and trying to figure out those categories very early on, that's just going to give you even more flexibility when you actually fill out the AMCAS to focus on your story and the wording that really will allow you to shine through to those outcomes.
Yeah, just to add, I would definitely give myself at least 2 weeks before that primary application opens to make sure that you have everything in order. Because I know for me, I went through that issue where I accidentally put in the wrong grade for a class, and I'm thinking, oh, the medical school is going to think that I'm being dishonest. And They changed it at the end of the day, but if you could avoid like the stress of that and just get it done early and make sure that you're on point with what the grade is for each class and things of that nature, just do yourself that favor.
I have a question about the academic history part. So for some classes, you take like the lecture and the lab separately, so you get grades separately. So how do you put in the lab grading?
You can just list it all as one, because again, we are not sitting here and you will actually, when it comes to the application service, you'll actually have to list them all as separate courses, but we're not worried about calculating your GPA or anything like that. That's what we're going to use your transcripts and get official numbers for that. So it's really just more about sort of confirming both for you and for us, double checking, triple checking that you have taken what you need to take. And you're good to go. So don't bog down too much. Dwight's correct, and that is definitely something to worry about when you get to the real application, but don't worry as much about like that for us right now. Whatever the most recent grade is or the higher grade, it's fine. Put whatever you want down as long as it sort of lines up with some element of your transcript.
I think another benefit of like figuring out those categories when filling out the composite letter is that if you're not familiar with AMCAS, it's like a 3-tier process where you submit, then they have to process, and then it actually gets sent to the schools. You do not want to get caught up in the processing part. You want that to be as clean as possible so that it goes immediately to the schools that you're interested in. Because if you wrongly categorize the course, or if you just miss and just put like weird typos here and there, it's not going to make it past that, and that's just going to be a pain. So if you can figure that out here, that's all just making the actual process way more smooth for you.
Let me close this part out by talking about two quick things. So as you can see, it's a pretty firm deadline. So if you're a junior in the room and you're not really sure what your plans are, you're still kind of entertaining some things, you maybe had a conversation with Kim or Hugh or myself, and you're kind of in this place of continuous assessment, continuous evaluation of where you are. This is the case for both this deadline and every other deadline that we're going to talk about here next. Submit it. Meet the deadline. We cannot put you back in this process if you miss something. So even until you're 100% sure, if you're a junior in the room, if you're 100% sure you're not applying, then you don't have to worry about this. But otherwise, even if you're like 0.5% considering this, submit it on January 18th, 5 p.m. Eastern. Don't be late. No exceptions. And then you can get out whenever you need to. You could get out in February. You could get out in March. You could get out in May. You could be on the verge of hitting submit on AMCAS and be like, yeah, I'm not doing this. That's fine. We will be fine. But don't come sort of later being like, oh, can I get back in? The answer is no. We're just going to tell you right here. All of us are here. The answer is no. So stay on track with this until you're 100% certain you're not doing this. And if you're a senior in the room, I'm sure we'll probably talk about this later because there's probably been lots of questions about it in the Q&A forum. If you're a senior in the room, get it now, regardless of your plans. We have made adjustments to alumni policies with feedback from schools in mind. We are trying to line up with what we say the composite letter is, which is a snapshot of your undergraduate experiences. So we are trying to capture your undergraduate experiences. So if you are someone graduating in fall 21 or spring 22 or summer 22, now is the time, all right? The other note that I was gonna make about this is if you've taken a look at the application, there's one thing that's like, I don't know that I would call it confusing because there's instructions about it, but I will point this out. If you've looked at the application, you'll see that there's a lot of different sections of the compositor application, and the letters of recommendation section is there. It's listed, you can click on it, you can even technically fill it out. Unless you've already talked to your rec letter writers, which I'm sure we're gonna also talk about later, do not fill that section out right now, because if you put their name in, they will get an email that says you've asked them for a rec letter. So you need to be 100% sure that you've actually talked with them and communicated with them professionally, made sure they know what to expect. You can and will submit your compositor application with that section blank, possibly, based on where you are. We have some later deadlines that we will talk about here in a little bit when it comes to that particular section. But fill out every other section that corresponds with this slide. If you need to take a picture to remind yourself, you can find it in the compositor info session video. We will make reminding announcements about this in the resources that you will be plugged into if you are already part of the compositor SharePoint. If you're not in it, we're going to add you to it as you continue to fill out the self-assessment. Kim, did you raise your hand? Did you have a question? Sorry, just making sure. Yeah, I think everything. Why don't we talk a little bit about spring? Nathan, will you flip the slide real quick? I'm going to just briefly touch on this really fast. I don't want to get too bogged down in this, because right now your focus is more on the application and getting yourself ready to submit the application on January 18th. But there are more steps in the compositor process. All of this geared towards helping you be prepared for the summer to apply. If you're applying this May, or if you're senior applying down the road, the goal is to help you be prepared for the respective May and June that you will participate in the compositor process. So somewhere along the way, you will have an optional opportunity to meet with our executive director, Dr. Batisky. If you don't want to meet with him, it's fine. No harm, no foul. You can waive your ability to meet with him, but I would probably encourage you to meet with him. It's a good practice on just how to tell your story and answer why medicine or why dentistry, and get practice with that. And then, as you can see, which we will probably talk a lot more about in the Q&A, the biggest part of this whole thing, the reason why this compositor service exists, in addition to helping you prepare to apply, is this is also a vehicle for the submission of your letters of recommendation. And so you will have the opportunity to collect letters of recommendation and get those submitted. You need to talk to your faculty, PIs, doctors, dentists, mentors, whoever else is submitting a reference on your behalf. You got to talk to them. And this is the part that I mentioned that you don't have to have filled out on January 18th. You need to put their names in by March 1st. And then their letters are due 6 weeks later, April 15th. So we are asking you to ask them way in advance. Way in advance. In fact, if you kind of already have ideas of who you're going to ask them in January. As soon as you get back, ask them in January, so that you can comfortably and cleanly meet this deadline of March 1st. As an accountability measure, we will ask you to write your personal statement. We won't be reviewing these, but we will just be asking you to submit them and for you to get practice on telling your why. We will have some resources and events. Our Apply Committee will be doing some stuff on personal statements, but you'll submit a draft to us in April. And then last but not least, because we're asking you to submit an activity log in January that is only up to date as of January, you'll have an opportunity to tell us more about your spring semester. So you can update your experiences, the number of hours that you've done. You can do that through another Excel document in May. We're going to ask you to verify that you are, in fact, and indeed signed up to take an entrance test, the MCAT or the DAT. I think that was it for the spring update. Oh yeah, and then no, that's not it. This part is required. You do have to send us, if you're a current student, you do have to submit a final transcript. Your transcript hopefully should be done by then. We ran into issues in the past with transcripts, so we just want to make sure that your transcript is good to go, and we can help make sure that it's all good to go for your application services. So that should be the spring overview of the whole process, and then after that, we'll sort of be in grind mode and get your composite letters done so we can send them out ASAP, hopefully by late June, early July. And that is perfectly in time with when they start doing things, because as Sebastian pointed out earlier, there's processing time involved before your schools get your applications, which doesn't happen until late June and early July. So we are getting your materials in right as they are getting organized.
Thanks so much, Anil. So just moving forward, hopefully you guys have a better understanding of the nuances that go into the composite letter process as a whole. So now we will give our panelists an opportunity to dive into the grunt work. So we'll start off with essays as well as the short essays in the composite letter process. So a frequently asked question is, with the word limits, with the sentence limits that you guys are imposed in the composite letter, how should you prioritize what you want to say to make Danny's job, who writes all the letters, the easiest? And also, what should you prioritize in order to truly convey your motivations as well as being concise and effective with that? So I guess we'll start off with the peer mentors and then maybe even move to the advisors if they've seen any that were good or bad.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, I think when I was going through the composite letter process, I didn't really know what I was required for AMCAS. I'll just plug it in right now, but there's a YouTube channel called Med School Headquarters with Dr. Gray, this bald guy. He's amazing, and like students have literally been on there who haven't been able to get into med school, and they're literally unpacking their whole application, going through the details as to like how wording can be so important and how storytelling can be really manipulated to kind of tell your story in the best way possible. So if you can, definitely check that out, Med School HQ. But kind of going back to how to write these essays, I think it should be a combination, at least for composite letter, of what you've done, how it has affected you, and some snippets of what that looks like in terms of storytelling. So kind of like a mix of those three things really helps you tell the story so that they can really put together a nice cover letter for you as well.
Another thing, I feel like everyone should look this up, but on the AMCAS website, there's something, it's like, I don't remember the number, but maybe it's like 15 core competencies of,
You got it right.
of a medical school student or dentist, I'm sorry, I don't mean that, but just saying, right? And so I would look at that, and I'm sure it applies to everyone, but there's certain things that we all have to have: social competency, like analytical thinking, there's just a whole list. And so what I would do is, based off that list, I would just go get like a scratch sheet of paper and just like write down every experience that you feel had some sort of meaning in college that you really want to talk about. And then from there, just like pairing it up with the different competencies, because that's what the admissions committees are going to be looking for in an applicant. And from there, I didn't really pay attention to the word count. It kind of just, at first, like, you have no real guidelines as to how much you really know. So I would really just kind of like word vomit, honestly, to start off with, like for each of your experiences. Because honestly, when you're listing your awards, your achievements in a certain section where you can only have 15 spots, you're going to have to shrink all that down. So just to start off with each of the experiences that you actually care about, you want to talk about, including accolades, maybe publications you did, I would have a paragraph of just whatever the heck it is you want to talk about, anything that happened that you thought was meaningful. And I hope that throughout your journey that at least some of these experiences, maybe you were keeping notes. I know for me, at least, when I was shadowing, I made sure every day I was like writing, oh, like we did this today or that, and what I learned this day, or even research. So if you're not doing that, that's something I would start doing, is at least taking notes and different opportunities that you're actually involved in right now, because you're not going to remember all these things that were really meaningful to you when you first like got involved in it. And so that's a good place to start as well. Looking back, if you do have like your notes from when you did some summer shadowing and like how it impacted you, that's where I would start in terms of like brainstorming and looking at each experience that you found you think would help make you stand out as an applicant.
Hugh and Anil, perhaps any examples you've seen, or if not, what kind of structure or template you see that works to most accurately convey your messages?
Well, I guess the first couple things I would add. Number one would be listen to the advice that you just received. I think that was excellent. Be clear and concise. Have a purpose. I like the idea of pairing up your competencies with your experiences. And also sort of have what I call like a free write. So just free write it as long as you want to make it roll off the characters, and then go back and kind of pare it down to what we're going to submit. So you can get all the information you have up here on paper. And once you get it all on paper, I think you have a better chance of cutting out an excellent sort of graph to each question. So that would be my little tip, is to overwrite it initially and come back in and pare it down to a nice, precise, word-counted response.
I think these guys covered the essays really well. So I'm actually going to give you a little tip about the activity log. So with the activity log, you have 700 characters, which is also what the limit is with AMCAS. So characters is not words. Characters is letters, spaces, punctuation. That's a very short space. Also in your activity log, if you look at all the corresponding columns before that, right? Like if you've opened that Excel document, you see that the description is the far right column, and you have all this other stuff. Do not waste your 700 characters with, in spring of my freshman year, I did, no. Cut that shit out. Sorry, I shouldn't have. Sorry. Don't put that in there, because you have just listed that out in the corresponding sections that we just asked you for. We asked you for name, organization, dates of time of service, your position sort of title, who's a contact person, how long did you do it, how many semesters did you do it. You've provided all that context, so don't waste your characters repeating it. Get right to the point. In this experience, that I did this, I did this, I did this. And to Sebastian's point, I think if you have the ability, try to work in, what you learned, what you gained. I think you should also try as much as you can. So I think for the composite letter, we know what, we've all been here for a while now, right? So we know what volunteering at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Also, make sure you get your acronyms right. Don't put Children's Hospital of Atlanta. Let's be professional, detailed, make sure that we're putting things correctly. So we know what volunteering, we still need you to describe it and we need you to do it well, but we know what volunteering at CHOA looks like. We know what organizational involvement in such and such club looks like. We know what that award that you may have received is like. We know these things, right? We've worked with you, we've talked with you, we've been here for a while. So I would also sort of challenge you to look beyond just trying to tell us what those things are or tell Danny what those things are. Think about it from a perspective of there are 50,000 people applying from who knows how many colleges and universities. So they don't know what a resident assistant is. They don't know what president of Pre-Minority Society is. They don't know what, you being involved in Emory Hope is or whatever it is. So you have to set a little context and help them understand what is this experience? And out of all the millions of things that you could do at Emory, why is this the thing that you did? So if you have space in your 700 characters, provide a quick sort of positional or organizational description. What did you do and how did you contribute and what did you learn from it? If you can try to find out within 700 characters, which I know is hard, but if you can try to do that in 700 characters, that will be really both effective for you and effective for us to learn more about you and your experiences and your readiness.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Speaking of the activity log, I think there is also some ambiguity in terms of what should be included on it, as well as what it should be categorized under. To the peer mentors, what kind of things and tips would you give for activities, as well as how to consider what section they belong under, especially for maybe hobbies, as well as considering if something is clinical or not, if it's volunteer or not?
There's this huge AMCAS manual, it's this big PDF, and it has everything you need to know. And so when I wasn't sure about a class, I would just go onto it and search up the grade section, and then it would tell me, if the class is I don't even know. It's just
behavioral science, whatever.
I really don't remember, but it was just based off of what I saw on that manual. And the worst case scenario is that you would probably just call up the school and ask hey, what do you think? But honestly, I didn't do that. I would really just look at that PDF and then maybe reach out to your advisor, because the advisors tend to know. I would say, I love Neil. Neil, he knew everything. He knew everything.
Yeah, the AMCAS, the AAMC AMCAS manual is really good in helping you both categorize the courses themselves as well as categorizing the activities. You kind of start seeing the overlap based on a general explanation of what a clinical experience looks like, of what volunteering looks like. And then once those things kind of agree with each other, then that's how you start deciding what falls where. With the activity section, what you want to avoid is inconsistency. So they ask for a point of contact, what that person's point of contact is. Are they a president? Are they what is their position within that organization? You want to be able to justify the hours that you have there and make sure that point of contact agrees on those hours. You don't want them to actually then when they're looking at your application and they're scanning through it, they give them a call. They're like, oh, did they do 2,000 hours? No, they just came in for the first year. No, you can't do that. Essentially what you want to do is you have to agree on those hours with that point of contact so that consistency exists. And that way you avoid any potential hurdles that you encounter if there's no agreement between those two things.
Cool.
You feel like we covered it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I guess in terms of activities that may not be as clear cut, such as maybe exercising, running or cooking, would you say those should be added to the hobby section if you have space?
Yeah, I think they should definitely be added. Unless there is a way, I don't know how much people are involved. I think I personally got involved in a few things, and I put most of my energy into those few things that I was really passionate about. I did not have 15 things to talk about, but
It's okay.
and that's perfectly fine. Like I think like I added 2 or 3 hobbies, and that just adds a lot of spice to your application. Like it just makes you more interesting as a person. Like, and you want that there. You want that to be there. You want the cooking to be there. You want the dancing to be there. You want the YouTube to be there, or whatever your activities are. Like you want all of that to be there because that just conveys more of you as a person than another exec board position. You know what I'm saying? So like, make sure you add that spice because all of you are special in some way. So make sure you put that there.
Oh, so thoughtful. Yeah, no, I would echo, I sort of have a little catchphrases. Like I think in terms of listing experiences, to Sebastian's point, I think the other thing is if you list it, it's fair game for a question at an interview. And so I think you really have to be mindful about what you put on there. This is not meant to diss any particular experience, but like if you went on one day of like Emory Care Service Day for like 2 hours, I don't know that I would put that in there unless it led to something else, because that may have been meaningful, and hopefully it was meaningful in a way that, sort of sparked you to want to go get involved in something else. But it was the only thing that you did. I don't know that you want to sort of get asked about that in an interview. That might be a little tough to talk about a 2-hour experience. So for me, I think the biggest thing about, categorizing things, I think you gave some good suggestions about that. I think you have to think about the types of conversations that you've probably had with one of us, and how we've asked you to think about your experiences dating back to sophomore year, or if you had the chance to see us this year. Or if you're a senior in the room, talked about what you did kind of in junior year and stuff like that. So I think you have to use your best judgment as well. And I think in terms of the space, you definitely don't need to fill the activity log up, but whatever you do put in there, just be ready to be able to talk about it. Anything you'd add? Oh, good, yeah. Kim.
I know I'm not recorded.
No.
I'm the advisor A through H, Dr. Molay. So I just wanted to add that we're kind of talking about 2 separate issues, which is AMCAS in May, and then this is happening during winter break. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand you're going to keep working on these elements and components all the way up until you're in the AMCAS process. What was mentioned about the guide is something that PHA is going to work with you during application station, which is like a real-time event where you're in the PDF for AMCAS and we're there and we're helping you navigate that. So just remember this is a draft. Do your best, because what Danny has to do to paraphrase what you provided is create a really strong letter based on what you've put in January, not what you're putting into AMCAS in May. So put as much effort into that as you can, but know you can keep revising and working on it with your PHA advisor, and we will be supporting you on course classification and activity log and all of that. And if you have an opposite issue of what Sebastian talked about, maybe you have more than 15, it is a bit of a judgment call, so you want to work with your PHA advisor on how to maybe combine things or like what to leave off, and we will help you with all of those nitty-gritty things.
And for someone that may have like a lot of experiences, I feel like it helps to have a story to your application. So if you could pick those experiences that all kind of align down one type of track, like I know for me, I'm really into helping the underserved. So a lot of my experience is kind of tailored towards that. So it makes it a really easy starting point to talk about in like interviews and stuff later on, when everything makes sense what this applicant is doing versus just like, oh, I did X, Y, Z, and they don't have any type of coherence. It might make your application look a little, I guess, like smoother, if you will, by tailoring which experiences you take that were still meaningful to you, but knowing that there is some sort of correlation between all of them, so that you know what you want to do.
Thanks so much. So I think the last kind of question and topic that we'll cover before opening it out to the audience is recommendation letters. So we know that for recommendation letters, we want these letters to be specific and strong letters. So given that, the professors that you're asking, most of them only have an experience with you in the classroom, on top of the fact that they have many other letters to write. What kind of tips can y'all give about giving them the easiest time in writing that letter as well as what else should you provide them other than your transcript, your essays, your resume, or perhaps even meeting with them?
You want to start?
Sure. I think the first thing is having a meeting with them and being very candid within the meeting, not feeling so much reserved. I understand it is somewhat of a uncomfortable setting sometimes when you're approaching a faculty member, and it can be intimidating, but for you, I think it's very important that you have as much candor in the meeting and you ask the questions you want to ask in the meeting. Now, obviously, they can't disclose what they're going to write and what they're going to say, but you can certainly talk about how strongly they feel. Are they enthusiastic about writing for you? You can gauge that by the number of years you've known them or semesters you've known them, the interactions you've had with them. So be very forward in the request, be very forward in understanding their feelings about you. And I think that puts you in the best position to receive a positive letter. I always tell everyone, I'll pass it on. The number one rule for me when you're looking at a letter writer, determining who to write over someone else, is enthusiasm. And based on the conversation you have with them, you want there to be enthusiasm. You want them to say things like, I want to help you if I can help you in the future, that kind of coined phrase. You want to hear stuff like that. That to me is the single most important part of it.
I don't have anything to add. That was perfect. I mean, we'll probably need to talk a little bit about dispelling any myths about who to ask for letters of rec writers, so I can take care of that later. But anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a lot of doubt about like whether to ask a professor to write that recommendation letter for you. I mean, you don't need to have like babysat their kids or something like that, or like to have had multiple lunches with them or something like that. Like I know that's a doubt that comes up. Like, do they really know who I am? And then there's also like the area where like you're asking someone who doesn't even know who you are, who you might not even have had a word with. So it's kind of like a balance. Like you don't need to have like the most wonderful, beautiful relationship with this person, but make sure they know you at least. Like you've answered some questions in class, you've been to their office hours, you've had a word with them after class, maybe you had like a coffee with them at some point. So like a basic, level of knowing these people can sometimes be enough to ask for that rec letter. And even like some of my experiences where I asked for the rec letter, they were kind enough to like offer a follow-up for them to get to know me a little more, and for them to even have a chance to ask me what they wanted to have reflected on that rec letter. So that's kind of like the balance. So I just want to kind of demystify that you don't need to have like that amazing relationship yeah.
Yeah, you'd be surprised just going to office hours, even if you don't feel like you're that close with the professor, but it actually means a lot, like, to these professors, honestly. So if you're, like, kind of on the edge, maybe some professor's a little awkward, you don't know, like, I would definitely at least reach out and see how excited they are, because I'm not going to know specifics, but it definitely does make a difference when you at least go to their sessions. But another thing I wanted to say, too, was don't be afraid to ask a professor that you didn't do as well in the class. I did that, and I think it provided a nice dynamic in terms of growth, because I struggled in the class, and meeting with the professor, I wanted to highlight how I grew from this experience and allow me to do better in future classes in the subject that I'm studying. And so with that said, I think it's very important that if you have those classes that you struggle with, but you still made the effort to go back and, I don't know, maybe see if you could like review that final you didn't do that well on. I think it's very much worth seeing, all right, is my relationship with that professor still close enough that I could potentially get a rec letter that will provide that dynamic that a lot of other people don't necessarily have in their application.
I will add one thing, which is you asked about what should you give them. I mean, I think a lot of times if gauge that enthusiasm, as Hugh put it, and I think if they agree to write it, they'll oftentimes instruct you what they want from you in terms of writing, right? Like they ask you guys for CV or resume, maybe a copy of your personal statement, so they can kind of line up what they're writing to your own intentions. One other thing I'd probably recommend as well is like finding out about, when you talk to them, like ask them about like whether they want to be reminded or not. Everybody's a little different. You need to adjust your expectations and your own ways of navigating that. There are some professors who are like, don't remind me at all, I'm going to do it. And then there's some that might tell you, remind me like every day for the 3 days before April 15th. So you need to, that is a question that I would make sure you walk away with, because you definitely don't want to piss off your letter writers. So make sure you have an understanding of communications and expectations as well upon them agreeing to write for you. Should I talk a little bit about which ones people should try to get? So you have the ability to get, you need a minimum of 3 to put into your composite letter. You can have a maximum of 4. Out of those 3 to 4, we typically advise that you get at least 1 science professor writer, 1 other professor, science or otherwise. It doesn't have to be a humanities, whatever that comes from. I don't know. I hear that a lot in my advising appointments. Who do I get for my humanities letter? It doesn't have to be 1. And then the 3rd and or 4th one can come from other people who are enthusiastic about writing for you or know you the best. If you spend a lot of time in research, that should probably be 1. If you spend a lot of time in volunteering somewhere, maybe that should be one of the ones. If you spend a lot of time working somewhere, perhaps a supervisor from that experience. So keep in mind that it should probably be the people who are, really that can speak to the time that you spent in critical and meaningful experiences. And if you have more than 3 or 4 that you want to send, we will talk about this down the road. I think to Kim's point, we are definitely talking about obviously composite letter, but also, sort of navigating a little bit of advising about the summer. So we'll talk about this later. We're going to have another one of these as well after the application is due, and we're planning for one on January 19th. So we'll talk about that then, but, and with other events that are coming in the spring. And as Kim said, we will also have lots of application stations, which are advising support events in the spring. But I think on top of that, you have the ability to send additional letters of recommendation in addition to your composite letter. So if you have other letters that maybe can't meet those timeframes, that's okay. You can send them separately and they will still be looked at and reviewed, and we will help you navigate how to make that happen effectively. Yeah.
And then I just want to add to support what Dwight was saying. If you have some real meaningful experiences that you're going to be talking a lot about as an applicant, and you have sort of a theme, you want to be thinking holistically about the writers that are going to support what you're going to tell the medical school has been meaningful to you. You're going to tell them that you want to work with vulnerable populations. Hopefully you have a provider or someone that's observed you in that setting writing for you outside of just the professors. Because sometimes when it's just the professors, it's a little skewed. When we talk about holistic development, we're talking about clinical and academics and leadership. So think holistically about your letters as well.
I'll just add one more thing as well. I think in research, there's some folks that when you ask for a rec letter, they'll be like, yeah, just go ahead and write it yourself. Send me a draft. We'll take a look at it together and let's submit that. There's ways, don't just accept that. You don't want to write your own recommendation letter for medical school. So if you can kindly let them know, please, this means a lot to me. I need your perspective on who I am. That is definitely something you should do. Do not write your own recommendation letter for this stuff. You don't want to sound essentially just don't do that. You want to have someone be writing about who you are and not you trying to write who you are. I think that just, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it happens, and I think it happens a lot in research as well.
I'm glad you said that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Are there any last minute topics you guys want to cover before we open it up to the audience? Cool. With that being said, if anyone has any questions they want to ask, we'll use the last 10 minutes to answer those to the best of our abilities. Any questions at all?
Oh, don't be shy. There's one.
So if you're planning on taking a couple gap years, how will experiences after the composite letter be in your application? Is it just through ANCAS that you would?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yeah, the answer to your question is yeah. Well, you'll capture it through your application, and then you probably will want to have additional letters of recommendation to support postgraduate experiences.
Sure.
So if you were really involved in something freshman year, and then it fell off over COVID, and now it's is that something you should still put in and talk about? How?
What do you guys think?
If it was meaningful and it helped potentially jumpstart you into something further that you really wanted to do, I think it's definitely worth including, especially because I'm sure there's going to be a COVID question and you'll be able to mention, like this just got thrown out the window because of, this nonsense. So, I mean, it's something that they'll be understanding of, and yeah, if there's something meaningful that you think will help make you stand out, or even not stand out, just something you really cared about, I would put it in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this might be more for Sebastian and Dwight, but what was something that may have caught you off guard during this process?
Ooh, good question.
Oh yeah, just straight up, like I could tell you the personal statement is, it just takes so much time to write. Like, I think because I had a lot of trauma from like academic essays in college.
Sebastian.
My personal statement was an essay at the beginning. It had like a thesis, the 3 points you want to touch on, the 3 ideas developed, a conclusion, and it was trash. So make sure you really take the time to understand how to write a personal statement. I think that was the thing that caught me the most off guard.
Are we talking specifically about the composite letter or just like the general application process?
We can go both.
Well, I'll start with the general application process. So I didn't know that, like when you apply, like the primary application, you send it out. Cool. I didn't know I was going to get secondaries from every school I applied to. So I applied to a ton of schools, and they were just like coming in like crazy. I'm just like, I was trying to enjoy my summer, and I couldn't. Like that, I don't know, like that end of June, it was over for me. I was just straight writing essays, and then finding out you have to take other tests. I thought it was just the MCAT. Then it's more, and it's all costing money. It's a Casper to see if you're a good person. And then there's the SJT. Another test to test if you're a good person. And it's just all, the SJT didn't cost money. But it was all just like a bunch of nonsense. But besides that, like the actual composite letter, I would say what surprised me was, I guess going back to the personal statement, I'm not the biggest writer either. But on a good note, it doesn't have to be perfect. But you'll never know when you'll figure out the right personal statement. Like I literally changed my personal statement like 2 nights before the primary application was due. After this whole process, I turned it in and they're like, but it works. And then I was like, of course I wasn't satisfied. And then last minute it just clicked, I know what to write about. Switch it up, gave it to Neil, good. So you never know. You never know what could happen. And you kind of just have to feel it. Your first draft of your personal statement isn't going to be great. It could change completely, and mine changed completely. So I think that's the biggest surprise I had with the composite letter process.
I'll add, I think to that point, that's part of why you see it up there as a deadline on April 1st is to get you started. Because I think anyone who's submitting that one, that's probably not the one you're submitting later in the summer. So just write something, take time, try to actually do it. Maybe don't write an essay like Sebastian tried, and go from there.
I'll just add one more thing. So it's important to stay organized, especially after primary submission. There's really good templates online for like Excel sheets that allow you to stay on track with like dates. There's like a goal date that you want to keep in mind for secondaries, and it is to turn in that secondary at most 2 weeks after receiving the invitation to complete the secondary. Obviously, they tell you that you can submit it November 1st. But you don't want to do that. That's why there's that like under the table deadline of like at most 2 weeks. And the way you stay accountable for that is not by looking at the email and then forgetting about it. No, you have to actually log that somewhere and then log the date 2 weeks after that and stick to that plan. And if you don't have those dates like clear somewhere on paper, it's very easy to just put them off. And you can prevent that by staying organized with those templates that are available online.
Thanks for the question, Abhi. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yep.
Are there any like don'ts for essay writing or activity writing?
Oh, that's a good one. Don't lie. People try. I wouldn't say like with us in the compositor, but people do lie and embellish things and exaggerate to the point that it's not true. So that's probably mine. Do you have one? That's a good question.
That's a hard one.
That's a really good question.
the obvious, don't plagiarize.
Oh yeah, we've had that happen before.
Any form of plagiarism, to be more specific, make it all unique to yourself. I guess, yeah, that's really, in your activity log, I'll say this, in your activity log, like we've all mentioned, I guess the don't would be make sure the things you list are meaningful to you. I think that's the don't. Don't list anything that you feel wasn't meaningful or frivolous, or, like we kind of mentioned earlier, we didn't spend more 2 hours with it. Leave that stuff out. Because
I would just add, like, don't miss the opportunity to put your voice into your composite letter, because it's not about how well you know PHA advisors or the peer mentors. It's about your relationship with your mentors who are writing your individual letters and the effort you put into this process of what's due on January 18th. So don't miss the opportunity by running out of time and just gotta throw something together. It's just the PHA office, because your voice is in that letter and the medical school gets the letter.
Just to add one thing there about writing and don'ts. There's obviously room to stretch reality to a certain extent, right? But don't is there's limits to that, right? The limits lie where those contact people can no longer justify what you're putting there. And that's I think that's the best way to kind of understand that.
I thought you were dropping a calculus problem on us there.
I'll say don't sell yourself short. Don't just look at a score and be like, oh, I'm not good enough. It's a holistic thing. It really is. I did not anticipate getting some of the interviews I got. So with that said, if there's a school you're really interested in, no matter what the score is, shoot your shot.
yeah, I echo that. Don't deny yourself. Let somebody else tell you that. Don't you tell yourself that. That is great advice.
That's a good closing point right there. That's a mic drop right there.
Awesome. So with that being said, thank you all so much for coming out today. Let's give a round of applause for our As the holidays are around the corner, feel free to try to set up any meetings with any of the peer mentors and your advisors if they have any open for the rest of the semester.
Come on Wednesday if you still have additional questions. We have a chili cook-off. You need breaks for your studying for finals. Come eat some chili. Even if you don't eat chili, come hang out with us. We'll have other treats and games, and this is a great time to ask questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask today, or come see one of us if you haven't had the chance to see us this year. So, see you then. Bye.